Realize there's situations and jobs and people that are willing to say yes for me, so I'm going to say yes for them. And then there's some people that in some jobs that it's like, you know what, they don't need me particularly. I'll help here and if I can, but I'm not going to overextend. I'll overextend for some things, some projects, but they have to be like close to my heart. They have to be passionate, and also I have to be able to sacrifice other things. Hey there, welcome to the Culture Architects Podcast. I'm Chad, and I'm here with
Lex. Hey.
Yep. So right before we get into the episode, I want to remind you to like, subscribe, and share. Do everything you can to help us to kind of get the word out what we're doing here, and we appreciate that. So we're gonna get into our episode today. So Alexis, what is some things like that you have been kind of dealing with or have overcome over the past year or so, like that you're now seeing kind of like as you got free from things, like what are you seeing it affected, or like how are you kind of living differently than a year ago?
Man, one of the biggest things that I struggled with most of my life that I didn't realize until it was like said was people pleasing.
Right.
And I think that's a big one for a lot of us.
Yeah.
But I wasn't fully free from that until actually I did a Bible study with other ladies.
Oh, wow.
On boundaries. And in that, this lady talked about in her book how people pleasing is tied to not setting boundaries and taking on other people's stuff on you. And so in that, I was like, oh my goodness, that's me.
Yeah.
I'm like, I have a fear of missing out. I say yes to everything because I don't want that person to be disappointed.
Yeah.
And also I found my validation in other people's words, my worth. And so the more that I did for others and the more that they liked me, then I was like, okay, I'm doing great. But then the minute they didn't, then I was like, man, what can I do to please them?
Right.
But it literally had it me to the point that I couldn't live for myself. I was always living for everybody else.
Right.
And I wanted to live for myself. I wanted to pursue what my dreams and what God was wanting me to do.
Yeah.
But I was so wrapped up in that it held me back and I was stuck.
Yeah.
So now here I am today, finally moving things forward because I had to reevaluate my life and say, man, I am people pleasing, and had to set some boundaries. And when I did that, it was hard, but now I'm at the point where I say no, probably too much. I'm like, no.
Yes.
But it feels good. And now I'm like, I have more time with my family, have more time to do what I'm supposed to do. I'm focused.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, because I mean, even like what I've observed is like, you know, y'all are doing a lot of like outreaches now and like things like that. And a year ago, like, it was kind of sporadic, like y'all would do things here and there, but now like you're doing a lot of stuff that's like, you know, that you've wanted to do and things that you wanted to step out in.
And consistent with it.
And so like practically, what did kind of the boundaries look like for you? Like what did they, because, you know, I think some people out there, they're like, okay, well, what do I need to do? So what were some of the boundaries that you set, like practically?
So for myself, I had like a codependent nature, meaning like, I thought I could be someone's savior. So even with family members, which now that I look back, it was meant to be a time sucker. There's time suckers in our life that are I think sent from the enemy to try to get you to be distracted. So I would have family members or even friends that were there that would like kind of be a victim and always like put that on me. And because I'm like in my nature, I love to help people. I would get sucked into it and I'm like, what can I do to help you? And always helping them before myself and my family. So it got to a point where it was too much.
Yeah.
And a spiritual father actually was like, did you think of codependency? And like, he showed me this whole thing. So after realizing that, I realized I had to cut that thing off, like trying to take their baggage on thinking that I can help. So the practical ways of breaking that was saying, hey, I see that you have this issue, but I'm going to focus on my family and stuff first. So if you need help, then I can help you in this specific area, but I can't take on the whole responsibility. So I'll point you in the right direction, maybe give you some resources, but I can't take on that whole thing.
That's good.
And so once I did that, it was easier and they started to respect that. Now there have been scenarios where people didn't respect that and then I haven't heard from them, but either way, it brought peace into my life and my family.
Yeah, but I mean, I think it did play out too, where like you said, you got to do more of your stuff and you have to focus more on your family, which is good because like that's, you know, for a lot of a lot of us, I don't think we realize, at least in it, like our first ministry is called Our Family.
Right.
And so I think a lot of times, because, and I've caught up in the same type of thing of trying to please people, trying to do for people, trying to do for ministry.
Yes.
And then I had to look at it and go, wow, I'm not ministering to my family.
Right.
Like I'm supposed to be the head of my household, and I'm not ever at my household. I'm never with my household.
Yes.
And so I think that's what kind of drew me, where I kind of left what I was doing, was because I looked around and was like, a lot of what I'm doing is so built on the approval of other people,
right,
and the applause of other people.
Yes.
And it's not their fault for that. And I think a lot of times we can blame other people and be like, well, and like you said, there are some people that are like leeches, right? Like,
yes.
But then there's some people that are just existing, and that we kind of hold them in a higher light, or we,
right,
we respect them. Yeah.
Right.
And so, like, whether it's a spiritual father, whether it's a spiritual brother, like whatever, or whether, like you said, like it's actual family, like relatives. And we always want to be, right in their eyes, or we want to do them right. And so I think a lot of times when we're in those scenarios, we can begin to forsake everything.
Yes.
And that's what I was seeing when I was doing, I would come home and I'd see, my newborn, like literally, 6 hours a week, like literally. And it's like, that was the normal schedule, because I was never home.
Right.
The wife was always home taking care of the kid, never anywhere, just because I was always out. And so, like, I wasn't giving her time. I wasn't giving and then so what I did was I projected and said, okay, now a year from now, our kid's a year old. Now dad's not in his life as much. Okay, 2 years old, 3 years old. And like, that's not what I want for my kid. So I had to make adjustments in my life, like literally life-altering adjustments, moving across the country, quitting a job, because I began to realize, like, what I was doing, like, while I was, yes, called to it, like, so like what I was doing, yes, like it was a gift, it was calling, but like what I'd done is I'd allowed it to be perverted in the sense of, because it became a thing where I was fulfilling, pleasing people in the sense of, like, I was now using it, instead of like pleasing unto God, it was pleasing unto, well, if this person says they like it, then that's now my validation.
Right. I'm going to pursue that thing even harder, so I can get it again and again.
It was almost like chasing a high.
Yeah,
like, that's almost like what it is.
Right.
And I think, because that's what it is. When you have validation, you have acceptance from people. That's why it's so dangerous to fall into the trap of constantly chasing that.
Right.
Because if you constantly chase validation, eventually the clapping gets a little bit lower and lower, and people stop clapping for you.
Right.
And it's no longer there.
And you're dying because you're like, man, I need that.
Right. And that's what I realized a lot of, like, me in ministry was based off of, was the applause. And so I had to come and basically do surgery and take that out of it. Right. And now go, okay, that's not what I'm living for. That's not where I'm at. So now I need to disassociate. So it wasn't my environment's fault. It was and like you said, like, you had to then say, okay, these are the boundaries I'm setting. And I'm the same way, in the sense of, yes, 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 yes. And that's all I say. But now what I've done is I realize, like, there's situations and jobs and people that are willing to say yes for me. So I'm going to say yes for them. And then there's some people that in some jobs that it's like, you know what, they don't need me particularly. I'll help here, and if I can, but I'm not going to overextend. Right. Because what I've realized is I'll overextend for some things, some projects, but they have to be, like, close to my heart. They have to be passionate. And also I have to be able to sacrifice other things. Because now it's like, for me, family time, spending time with family is non-negotiable. It's very negotiable for me, and I think that's the thing is like, we have to have non-negotiables. Right. Like you said, we have to have boundaries. Like, we have to have things that are like, hey, these are the road marks where we're not going to give in to these things. So if a project, if someone comes up and says, hey, I need help, and it jumps the boundary, we have to be willing to go.
To say no.
Yep.
Right.
And so, I mean, can you kind of talk to too, and we were talking about it kind of like with the timing side of everything, and how, like, sometimes I think you can even miss, like, if you're caught up in the man pleasing and kind of people pleasing, you can get caught up in, like, where you miss the timing that God had for you. Right. For things to grow, or for things internally, or because even, like, I look at with you with Speak Life, like, how cool would it have been if we started a year ago? Right.
I'm saying, I know that there's some things in my life that I missed. Timing for it specifically, but
right. And I think the thing too is, the good thing is there's redemption in all of it. Right. So, like, it's okay, because here's the thing, the timing is perfect. God's timing is perfect. So how you started, we're about to come up on a year of Speak Life, and it's like, at least you started, and then what's cool too is, like, what I love is, like, your journey of like all this stuff is kind of captured in Speak Life, because you were going through the whole man pleasing and all that, like while you were doing your podcast, you were overcoming it. And so I think it's cool because it kind of shows like full circle of where you were within a full year. And so like, can you kind of talk to like that, like in the timing aspect of things with your life and like things that you've been going through?
So not only with Speak Life, but there was actually some things in my life that I knew I was supposed to do and I just couldn't. I was stuck. So because of that, I actually saw before my eyes other people get raised up in that thing and how they were catapulted.
Oh, wow.
And I know, and even my husband, he'll say, he's like, you know, you were supposed to do that. And I'm like, I know. And I didn't beat myself up. I could have in the moment. And there's a few times that I thought about it, but then I'm like, but I got to keep moving forward. But I think with the Lord, like there's an urgency in the spirit for specific things because he's needing that thing to be done on the earth. And so I think that there's a window of opportunity and we could miss it. Or he'll raise somebody up to do it. Of course. Because we're his hands and his feet. And so in my life personally, because of seeing things like that I'm like, I knew I was supposed to do that and I didn't. When it came time to like that nudge again that I felt with Speak Life, because I almost ignored it. I ignored it the first time. But then when it came back and I had that nudge again, I'm like, I got to give it my all because I don't want to miss this thing. And be that person 50 years or 30 years from now, it's like, man, I coulda, woulda, shoulda. I had this idea and then it never turned into anything because I was afraid to fail. Or afraid that people weren't going to think I was qualified and all these different things.
And so, I think the cool thing too is like, you know, when it kind of goes in all that, like you know, could you have started a year earlier, 2 years earlier? Yeah. And would it have been successful? Maybe not. Like, because
my heart was different, like my attitude.
And so like you hadn't walked through everything you've walked through now. And so I think sometimes, you know, it's one of those things of like, well, what's the right timing? You know, like when do I start something?
Discerning the time.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times it's like, just, you're going to have to jump out on a limb. Be willing to fail and then come back to it. You know, because I mean, the truth is okay, you know, say Speak Life, it kind of you stepped out and it didn't work out. Well, you know, hopefully that didn't kill your, you know, aspirations.
Like, I'm done. That's it.
Yeah, it didn't work. You know, like you at least come back to it eventually. You know, maybe there's something else you were supposed to be doing in that time. I think that's kind of because the hard thing is like, well, how do I know what the timing is? It's like, no one will know what the timing is. Like but you can try and you can give the effort. And I think that's kind of where it boils down to is like, are you willing to kind of jump out and give the effort?
And I've heard someone say this that was profound. They said that it could be the right thing at the wrong time or the wrong time with the right thing. So really like being in tune with the spirit to know when you're supposed to release something or when you're like trying to force it and it's not the right time.
And that's huge. I mean, because a lot of times if it's the wrong time, right thing, or the right thing, wrong time, you could be discouraged. And then just drop it.
Burn out and you're like, I'm done. I'm never doing it again. Or make a vow or something.
Exactly. And I think a lot of times we have to celebrate the wins of saying like, okay, hey, like I was really passionate about this thing. It just didn't take off. So, hey, I'm passionate about it. I feel released to still do it.
Put it in this file.
Put it in the file. Yeah. And it's like, because I think a lot of times we'll hit the right timing and we'll have the wrong thing. And what's crazy is a lot of times the right thing is sitting on the shelf of the things we'll never do again because it failed, and we're in the right timing, but we're not willing to do that thing again. And so I think it's stepping out and like, because the truth is kind of, and tying it back is like, a lot of times the reason we won't go back to something that we failed at is because we don't want to look weak to other people. Or like we had like, oh, you know, admitting to other people, hey, we were wrong with this. Or like, we got the timing wrong, the thing wrong, but hey, now we got it. And maybe now we don't want to return to it because it makes us look weak to people or it makes us look some type of way. And I think a lot of times that is the people-pleasing side of us will prevent us from going forward in things, you know, and walking things out. Because like, you know, I mean, when you have a calling and you have something that you feel like you're supposed to do, a lot of times it can kind of feel awkward because you look around, like you said, you saw other people doing similar things. So then it's like, well, wait a second. Am I supposed to do it now? Like they're doing, but like you stepped out of and you said, okay, this is what God called me to do. I'm not going to look at all this other stuff. I'm going to stay set on what I'm supposed to do. And that's been cool to watch because like you really have kind of stepped out and said, hey, like whatever it looks like, whatever, this is what it's going to be. And that's been cool.
And it's crazy because I think I'm willing to like fail and get back up. Because before I would make that vow. I have made a vow in the past that's broken now, but I was like, I'm not going to fail. And I actually got it from a movie. I don't know if you ever watch Robots. Like the cartoon, like the animation. And in it, there was this guy that said, never try, never fail. That's my motto. So whenever something wouldn't work out, I would jokingly say that, but I would say it over and over to the point that I know I made a vow. And it's crazy because I would say, I'm not going to try, because if I don't try, then I won't fail.
Yeah.
And the next thing you know, I wouldn't try anything. Yeah. And then the Lord had to show me that I had made that vow. And I was like, oh my goodness, something as silly as that became my motto for real.
Wow.
And so I think a lot of us can have like that fear of failure. Yeah. And like you said, it can tie in with the people pleasing, because you're like, if I fall on my face, I'm going to look bad. Yep. People are going to be like, what are you doing? Right. And it's funny because half the time people aren't even thinking that. No. And if they are, people love the underdog that fell and came back up and didn't give up, you know?
Yeah.
So
I mean, and the thing too is that people are so like, with how they feel, so wishy-washy. You know, one moment it's, why are you doing this? And say, oh, this is incredible. And so I think a lot of times if we leave it up to the people's choice, they'll always be the opposite of what we're supposed to do.
Right.
A lot of times.
So you can't. It's so like uneasy.
I mean, now there's difference of, spiritual advisors and things like mentorship is like, like, if you have somebody that's like, hey, but even then, like, as much as you should take it to the people that are your mentors in your life, you should also still take it beyond them to God.
Right.
Because a lot of times, mentors can be wrong. Mm-hmm. And especially when it comes to timing and things like that. And not saying they always are, because a lot of times they are hearing wisdom as well. And then they're walking in wisdom. And they potentially been through what you've been through. So, but a lot of times you have to also go to God and say, okay, where am I with this? Like, okay, my counsel is saying this, I feel this way, where does this sit? And you have to be willing to wait sometimes and be okay with, being like, you know what, I'm in the waiting.
Right.
I don't know what the timing is. I'm just in the waiting. And so, and that doesn't always feel right.
Right.
And it can look like indecision to other people. Mm-hmm. But like we say, you have to move out of people pleasing, because like, oh, well, people are going to think that I don't know what I'm talking about. And it's like, who cares? Like that's, you don't know what you're talking about. Like you have to walk things out. You have to go further in things to even know, like, hey, what am I supposed to do in the season? Yeah. And I think that's, and it's one of the things too, where it's like, your journey is your journey.
It's going to be different from everybody else.
No one else's journey. People can help you along the way, but ultimately you're the one that has to do your journey. Yeah. You have to live it out.
Yeah, so, that's good. Yeah. What is that saying? It says something like, if you live by the praise of man, you'll die by their criticism.
Yeah.
And that 100%. Literally is so true.
Yeah.
Because if you live for what they say, then when they say something that hurts you,
right,
you're going to die by that criticism.
Yeah. And I lived in there for a while, like where it was like, like I had ebbs and flows, like, where it was like life was really good and then life was really bad because somebody shot something down. And it's like, why am I so reliant on this? And it's like, because I'm thriving off their praise, and so I'm dying by their criticism. And it's funny because I went through a stage in my life where I just became so callous to critiques. I would just do them, but like I was at a point where I wouldn't even hear correction. So I was like,
go through one ear.
And I would just fix it, but it wasn't like, it never rooted. So it was just in the sense of just so callous that it was like, okay, like, it's almost like I'm always wrong anyway.
You were like hardcore, like,
well, whatever I do is going to fail anyway. So whatever you want to do, okay, I don't care. Like, that's how because I had become so used to just listening to whoever and heeding just their feelings that it just became a point where I was like, all right, whatever. Like, I'm not even going to try. Like, I'm not even going to put my effort into it. So obviously I've done the 180 on that, but that was a tough time because it was like everything felt like if it was my idea, it was going to be a failure. Right. But in reality, it wasn't. It was just I began to feel that way because of people around me.
So you almost put like this wall that was like, the thing would just bounce off of it and
everything.
It wouldn't affect you because you're like, whatever.
And nothing could come out of me because I was so walled off.
That's good.
Yeah.
Another perspective is when people are into the people pleasing and someone tries to say they can't do something, they do the opposite of not doing anything, but they strive, but in the wrong way.
Yeah, that's
so
good.
I know people that literally have done a whole career to try to prove a point to someone that they're not even meant to be in because they're like, I'm going to show you. And I'm like, that's wrong too, because you totally missed what God was wanting you to do because you wanted to try to prove someone wrong. Yeah. So your whole life was based on that. That's crazy too.
I've been there.
Like, striving in the wrong way.
Because I literally there was a season in my life where something happened and someone was like, hey, like, you seem like you're doing good. It was about 3 months after. They were like, you still like you're pushing forward. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna be a monument to the fact that they don't think I can do it. And it was like, that's not what I was supposed to be, but like that was my motivation, and it got me through that season. And I'm thankful that I got through that season. But I got through it by being like, I'm gonna be a monument to everything they said I couldn't do, and I'm gonna do it. And it was like, that's not what I was supposed to be doing, but it was like, hey, they told me I couldn't do it. I'm gonna be spiteful.
Yes, and it's almost like out of this bitterness you're gonna show them.
100% bitter. I was so bitter for so long, and ruined like a bunch of relationships because I was just like, hey, I'm doing this. Like, I don't look. Am I bad at it?
I'm gonna stomp at
my
way through.
Exactly. Yeah. But you know, and so I was out to prove something. And I think that's where, like, because there's one thing to prove something like, hey, I can do this to yourself. But then when you're trying to prove something to other people, it falls under the man pleasing. Because I'm going to prove that I can do this. Is like, who?
Then it's striving instead
of. The only person that you really need to prove something to sometimes is yourself.
Right.
Hey, I can do
overcome this, or
because a lot of times people deal with insecurities inside themselves that don't allow them to do certain things. So you do have to prove to yourself, hey, I can step out. Hey, I can speak in public. Hey, I can do ministry. I can prophesy over somebody. I can pray in public. You know, that is the thing. Okay, you have to, but you don't have to prove that to anybody else. Once you prove it to yourself and you know you can do it, who cares what other people think?
Right. That's
you know, and that's where I think you've got to get in your mentality for everything.
Yeah.
Is I don't have to prove anything but to myself. Because the only person that needs to be convinced that I can do this is myself. You know?
So, that's good. Yeah. When I was interning with this ministry one time, there was this lady that literally looked me in my eyes and she goes, you won't amount to anything. She's like, I don't see you amounting to anything. You're just like, and I walked out of there and I made a vow and I was like, watch me. I even put it on Facebook. You know how like the memories could be cringy? You're like, was that the same
my God,
person?
I delete so many of them.
Oh my gosh, I'm like, that's weird. That's like cringy. But it was one of those posts that I posted, and every year I'll see it because it comes up, and it said, funny. Mark my words, I will make it. I will be somebody or something like that. And I look back and I'm like, I made a vow over someone's stupid comment. But if I knew who I was, I wouldn't have stood on that and tried to strive.
Right.
Because I'm like, no, you say I'm this, but I know who God says I am.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to stand on that. But I tried to prove something to prove her wrong. Well, when they're long and gone,
exactly.
Remember what they said.
So
it's
it's like you trying to build a foundation off of something that's just not like it's going to be gone in a year or two. It's gone,
and
like
they're not even thinking about it.
They're so far removed from it, and then you're like building your entire career off of it. Yeah,
your life. Then you wonder why some people are depressed and stuff. They didn't want to do that thing, but they did it to prove mom and dad wrong, or family, or whatever.
So for sure. Well, I think we kind of reached the landing spot.
Yep.
So, all right. Well, we'll see you next week.
Bye.